Ruchikar, thank you for taking the time out to do this interview with India Global Business today. I thought we could start off a little bit about your thoughts on the India-Denmark corridor and what sort of opportunities within the tech sector are available for Indian companies in Denmark.
Yeah, so I think, so first of all, Ishita, thank you so much for this conversation. I think the India and Denmark relationship has been very old, but of recent, it has been started growing in a very big way. Uh, I also think it's in many ways it's very unique because of the strategic focus Denmark has on areas that are also very strategically aligned with India, broadly speaking, right? So if you look at the green partnership, that is the big news. In Denmark, it has been there for a long time, the focus on green and green energy and green tech and so on. On the other hand, in India, uh, greenization is an extreme kind of critical need of the society, right? Our scale in India, our cities, our urban centers, our rural areas, all of them need technology boost uh, to make our world better, right? If you go to Kolkata, if you go to Mumbai, if you go to Delhi, right, the centers are really packed, right? And simple solutions that work maybe for uh, for world everywhere else will probably not work so well in these places, right? Simply because the population density is so high. I mean, in Mumbai, the population is 25 million. So it's 5 times the population of Denmark, almost. So the scale is unimaginable for most of the technology providers who are not based in India, right? So there is, I think, an immense hunger uh, for cleaning everything, right? Whether it's the river, whether it's the drain, whether it's the city, whether it's the road, simply because when you have 1.3 billion people, the there is a lot of cleaning to be done, and of course, we are a growing economy, and India as a growing economy needs to industrialize, and that industrialization, while provides a lot of benefits to people, but it also provides environmental impact, right? And the key balance really is how do we minimize and mitigate that so that the benefits we can keep and the downsides to environment can be reduced. Denmark has been a pioneer when it comes to wind energy, right? Vestas really defined in many ways what wind energy, how it can be scaled truly, right? And even today, it's probably the largest and the biggest provider of wind energy in that sense. So I think the partnership has a lot of significant advantage. Uh, Speaking from a purely from our perspective as STCS, as technology company, what I think one is it has immense applications. I think everyone can benefit, right? So for example, Denmark has a very strong um, uh, cluster, so to say, of robotics, right? In robotics, there is a city in central Denmark called Odense, not too far away from Copenhagen. And they have a very strong robotics cluster combined with academia, with startups. That whole cluster and ecosystem has been created for many years, right? And I think it's probably one of the leading clusters in the world when it comes to robotics, right? And we work very closely with some of the entities in the cluster, with some of the startups, with some of the academic partners, with some of the universities, and it's very interesting what can be done. The applications are quite immense. So, for example, one of our clients, one of the things that they are trying to do, how can they do, next day delivery, right? Not take 2-3 days, but just deliver the next day. Now, to do that, traditionally they've had sorting centers wherein mail would come, and then they will, in the evening, it will get sorted, and so on and so forth. And if the mail came, later, it will get sorted even later, right? So, and then people will work on it. And one of the things that we are kind of piloting with them is how do you automate through robots the sorting, so that sorting does not happen in batches. Sorting can continuously keep going. It doesn't have to stop simply because shifts are happening. A robot can continuously work, and it will not make any errors. Right? There's no human error involved. You just have to tell it very clearly, right? So how do you do sorting? And for that, sorting, picking is extremely important because parcels are of different shape. They could be small, big, fragile, this, that. So how do you, so that's one example, right? Trying to see how can they do a 24/7 sorting so that they can actually provide next day, or as they are thinking same day type of delivery. So that's one. Second is warehouses. There are, warehouses, and how do you reimagine warehouses where there is very less manual intervention, right? So obviously, a standard um, uh, intelligence or a standard wisdom in warehouse management used to be that, okay, if, let's say I'm a retailer and I sell all kinds of things, and so I would keep all my iPads in one place, and I will keep inventory of them. I will keep all my mugs in one place, and I'll keep an inventory of them, and so on and so forth. So that someone, if I have to go and pick out an iPad, I need to know where exactly it is, how many of them are there. I go in one place, pick out, one or five or 10 or whatever, however many, and then I fulfill the order, right? Fulfill the warehouse delivery. But the thing really is when you have robots doing the picking, and when you have the robots doing the warehouse movement, then actually that's not a good thing. Because if you have 5 robots working in a mid-sized robot and all of them go to pick out 10 iPads, then they will have a contention. And then you can't have a contention, right? Because then it's very complex. In a way, it's like a traffic jam, right? All 5 of them are in one place, and managing that contention is even more costly and more difficult. So therefore, you must not keep them in one place. You must keep them strategically randomized so that there is absolutely no contention. They are totally in different places, right? So the conventional wisdoms are completely taken apart, right? When you look at some of these things. So I think the whole uh, the the partnership, and especially the background that Denmark has over a period of time in some of these things, is, I think, extremely value adding for the world, I would say, in general, and definitely with the talent that we have in India, there is no end to how we can apply these things to solve not only Indian problems but also problems all over the world.
That was a very insightful, look and very comprehensive look in Indian into the India Denmark partnership. But what can Indian companies bring to the forefront for Denmark? I was wondering if you could share your thoughts on that. I mean, obviously India's got its own strengths with engineering, things like that. But what can we really bring to the table for Denmark?
Yeah, I think there are 2 3 things, Ishita. One is that very simply, uh, so if you look at Denmark and India, uh, both parties can sell to each other. That's one, right? Indian companies can sell in Denmark, Danish companies can sell in India. That's very simple scenario. The other one is both together can collaborate and sell all over the world. Right? That's also a very interesting part, right? And Denmark has a very strong tradition of encouraging research and innovation, right? I think I had no idea before I moved here, but they have, I think, done outstanding work in identifying themes that are relevant for them as a country and globally, and then in a focused manner providing support and funding and encouragement to research to innovation activities that are taking place on it, right? And I find many of the things that Danish companies have done so well. You find, iconic Danish companies in many sectors. Probably it comes with that encouragement, probably, right? Because they have been encouraged to think different, and it's okay to fail. It's not a big deal if you fail, right? But you must try, right? Or you should try. So that has created a good, a very strong portfolio of different ideas that many people here are trying. Uh, but of course, I think the true value of ideas are when you can really scale them. So, for example, take med tech as as an area, right? The medical technology as an area. Now, it's possible in Denmark there are only 5 million people, and if you create a technology, or if you create a solution, or if you have an idea that will do a very small improvement, then testing it out and creating a value of it in Denmark is only so much, right? On the other hand, where you have a very, very huge scale, such as India, right, Mumbai, uh, any small 0.001% improvement in anything creates immense value for people, right? So if the diagnostics uh, of dengue, it can become better or easier, even in a very small manner, then the amount of people it will positively influence in India is huge, and you can see results much faster, right? As opposed to a European country, for example, because the scale is not there. So these things are, I think, but it's very difficult for a. So imagine Danish startups often are like, imagine I am a student, I did my master's, and maybe I even did my PhD in the Danish university, and I have these 2-3 ideas, and the university or the government has looked at my ideas and said, fine, these two things look very good, why don't you try? And now I have a basic, very essential thing working, right? And now if I have to go and try to sell that in India, it's it's impossible, almost, right? It's almost a culture shock. Going from a city like Copenhagen is still 1 million people, it's a big city, and you go to a people where 1 million are probably there and only in Borivali. you know so it's a culture shock. And I think many, in my limited interactions with the some of the startups, people who run them, I think they tend to get uh, overawed by simply the sheer scale, and it's, of course, there is time difference. You travel 7 hours, but I think more than that 7 hours travel, it's really, where do I go in this place, right? And they are used to, in Denmark, everything works the way it should, right? Everything is very well defined. It will work. Government has a portal for doing everything, right? It's, it's very well governed, right? As a governance, it's done very, very well. So if you are born and brought up and living always here mostly, and you've traveled to maybe Norway or Sweden or France, and these are your, or you've maybe been to India also, but only as a tourist. But living and working is a very different thing, and it could be quite challenging, and because things are very fluid, things keep changing. Not every government agency in India has a very well defined website, and even if it is there, not all information, it's not so easy, right? So I think partnerships are extremely value adding, given that both countries have so much to gain from each other, for the world, and so on. So my thought is that the for a Danish startup, for example, to even look at India as a market, doing it on their own, to me, it sounds even unimaginable. I don't even see how they will go about it, because for startups and high growth companies, the challenge is to first survive, right? They will not have endless supply of money all the time coming. So they have some time and some money, and within that they must prove themselves. And then only either they will get next round of funding or they can go public or whatever it might be. So they can't do it on their own. And therefore many don't, most don't, because they have few priorities and they want to make maximum impact from it. Going to India and trying to make big in that market is a too big a project, and it requires so many different types of expertise that they choose not to do it. And I think it's in a way it's an opportunity for companies to collaborate and try to find mutual value for each other.
It's interesting. You've made some really like poignant points there that I want to unpack. One is what you talked about, this culture of innovation and what it exists in Denmark, and conversely, if you look at that in India, it is not as encouraging towards failure. Um,
Yeah.
this is something that I've spoken to with many people from the field as well, and in my own limited experience. Indians or the Indian government or Indian funding agencies aren't as accepting of failure as part of the innovation as perhaps it is in the West. And so we were talking about startups and Danish startups trying to come into India. Um, I was wondering how that works for Indian startups who already have this challenge where, it has to be successful. If they're innovating, there's this humongous pressure on them to make it big and not fail in the first go. And then trying to expand, because everyone's going global now, particularly every business in India with the digitalization that's happening, everyone's going global. How does that work for Indian companies, especially Indian SMEs trying to go into Denmark?
Yeah. No, so I think, I have a different kind of thought on the innovation culture in India. I think one, of course, uh, the problems are very different, right? When there are larger societal problems, uh, drinking clean water, or then and then and so much of diversity. You have uh, places that are very well managed. There are places that are still struggling. You have all kinds of places and all kinds of diversity and all kinds of problems. So I think if I was running government as a company, I can imagine where the focus would go. Focus would go on basics that need to be handled, right? Whether it's the farmers or whether it's the poor. So that way, I can kind of imagine that there is not as much of encouragement and funding, especially funding given to startups. In India, startups are pretty much on their own, right? If you fail, then fine, you failed. But in here, it's not like that. If the idea is great, there is an agency, there are different agencies, they can fund you for a year or 2 years, and then they will keep tracking of how you're doing, obviously. But and they do that consciously, knowing that okay, some of these things may not work. I mean, that's how it is. But some of these things may become next Vestas, right? So and I think that's possible because the society in general is already in one minimum place, right? All of it. It's a very homogeneous in that sense. There are no extremes. So I've not seen poor people in Denmark at all, right? So for example, so when you don't have that kind of problem, it's very natural for government to be able to focus on these things. But on the other hand, while there is not much of thing, I think innovation also happens when the need is there. I think the startup scene in India is extremely intense and extremely I would say powerful. There are so many things happening with so many centers, not just one or two, right? So I don't think the innovation as a culture has a problem, but I think again it's I think that way the collaboration between an Indian startup and a Danish startup is something that they should all consider. I think the Danish government outlook is quite embracing in that sense. They don't try to create walls and build fortresses that way, which is a good thing, because I think you can't create innovation with walls. You have to collaborate to innovate. You can't create innovation in isolation, right? So I think they have got that very clearly. So there are they enable collaborations, right? Obviously with clear guidelines, but they enable collaboration. And I think it will be easy for any Indian SME to uh, find a partner here and find technology, either license or take license or whichever way, right? And work very well. So I think it's very easy to do that. Obviously, there are doing business in India is very. I think the challenge that the Danish startup guy faces here, the same an Indian startup girl may face in India. They've only worked in India, and there are certain way you do things, and that's very different from here. The culture is very different, and that's a major shock for many people who may come here for the first time, especially in Denmark. It's very different from many other places. The level of trust is very high, for example, and so on. So yeah, I think the opportunities are immense, and I would highly encourage them to look at it.
Thanks. I was wondering if you could share some of the projects. You've already talked a little bit about what TCS is doing on the ground in Denmark. But are there any particular key projects that TCS is doing?
We work in all sectors, and we work in most of the services from an IT perspective, technology, and also process perspective. So, for example, there is a financial services client, right? And then for them, we are doing for quite some time, almost 3-4 years. We have been working with them on robotics and how they can create larger value for their clients. So one of the problems that we have helped them solve is when someone calls to block a credit card, let's say, then earlier it used to take about 4 minutes or so, right? You call and say, okay, hello, I want to block my card. And then from the moment you say, I want to block my card, and you identify yourself and all that, and then you say, okay, block my card, and they initiate the process of blocking the card, it would take about 4 minutes or so till it gets blocked, right? And then, and now, I mean, think of if you are the one calling, why would you try to block your card? You would probably block your card because you've lost it, right? Or you've found it being compromised in some way or something like that. So something bad has happened. That's the reason you're trying to block your card, not because you just feel like it today. So when something bad has happened, 4 minutes is an humongously long time. It's a huge amount of time, and it's extremely risky, especially in today's world, right? In 4 minutes, what they found was that a significant amount of transactions in such cases used to go to Syria, for example. So there is a huge amount of fraud that can take place in such compromised card cases, and 4 minutes is just crazy. And so what we worked with them is how they reduce it. And now I think it gets done in just about a minute. So we've reduced the time from 4 minutes to about a minute. And then we are still working on how do we still squeeze it further. Can we make it instantaneous, almost in 1 second, right? That's the best thing. You say, I want to block it, and 1 or 2 seconds it gets blocked. That's the way it should be, so that there is no space left for any fraud to take place. So that's one area. How do we? So there are similar. I think one of the things that essentially the the business 4.0 world is creating a lot of opportunities for most of our customers, and a lot of our work is Denmark is centered around them. We do a lot of work with one of our clients on IoT. I talked about the robotics on the financial services side that we are working with, and so there are different types of things, very exciting work that we are doing. I think Danish companies in general are pretty ambitious, and so therefore that reflects in the kinds of projects they want to do. And so we are quite fortunate to have the opportunity to be able to partner with them.